So activity 1.6 continues with us actually developing the linear regression equation for a given data table. So in this example, we have a table that plots the cost of tuition or college tuition for various times. Right? So in 1987, tuition was $5,964. In 2003, tuition is $14,504. So question 1 says, let T be the number of years since 1987, and we're asked to complete the following table. So if T is the number of years since 1987, well, T here would be 0. And 1992 would be 5 years after 1987, so I'll place a 5 here. 1996 would be 9 years after 1987. 1999, that would be 12 years after 1987. 2001 would be 14 years, and 2003 would be 16 years after 1987. So I've answered question number 1. So let's move on to question number 2. They ask us to essentially plot these points on this graph, right? It says on the grid below, create a scatter plot using T as the input and C as the output, and then we're asked to write variable and word labels on each axis. So I've taken the input, T number of years since 1987, and I've labeled that on my horizontal axis, and I'm going to place cost on the vertical axis as my output. Now to plot each of the points. The first point is 0, 5,964. The second point will be 5, 8,238, and so on. So I've plotted all of the points, and my graph looks something like this. Right? And if you look at question 3, it asks, is this data exactly linear? And the answer is going to be no. The next question says, would a linear function be a reasonable model for this data, and why? I'm going to say yeah, because I could kind of draw a line that will go through some of these points, or many of these points. So I can say the points fall in this graph in a semi-linear function, or in a semi-linear fashion. So I think a linear function would be a reasonable model for this data. So the next question asks us to use a straight edge to draw a line on our scatter plot that you think is close to the line of best fit. So remember, that's really asking us to draw the line that's going to go through the majority of these points. So I think this line essentially touches the majority of the points, so I'm going to call this the line of best fit. We're now going to use our calculator to develop this exact graph with the equation for this line of best fit, and hopefully our calculator will give us a result in the form of y equals mx plus b. So I've actually posted a Word document in Canvas that will give you the steps to create a scatter plot and a linear regression using our calculator. So you can print these out if you want to have them on the side, but I'm going to be basically going through these steps 1 through looks like 19 to come up with a graph that's going to look like this. So I'm going to first open up my calculator, and I'm going to go through the steps. Now note, I have the newer calculator, so I have an extra step. For most of you, you will not have to do these first steps. I'm going to press the mode key, and I'm going to arrow down to where it says Stat Wizards down here, and I'm going to turn my Stat Wizards off. If you have an older calculator, you will not have this line, so you will not have to do this step. It's only for the people with the most newest version of the TI calculators. So I press enter, and now my off is highlighted. So now I'm ready to begin. So to get out of this screen, I'm going to press second and the mode key, and now I'm back to my home screen. So now if you look at step number 1 on the sheet that I provided in Canvas, it says press the STAT key, so I've done that. Step number 2 says press number 1 for edit, and we're going to fill in some information for this L1 and L2. Okay, if you have data in here because you have an old calculator, maybe your brother or your sister's calculator, you're going to want to clear anything that's out in this L1 column and the L2 column. Okay, so now we have to actually enter our data. So let's go back to our data table. So here's my data table. And under L1, I'm going to enter T number of years since 1987. So that's the 0. So I press 0 and then enter. I press the 5, I press enter. I press 9 and enter. 12, enter. 14, enter. And 16, enter. So here's my 0, 5, 9, 12, 14, 16. That's my L1. And my L2 will represent the college tuition costs. So I'm going to just move over to the L2 column, and I'll enter the $5,964 for tuition, the $8,238 for tuition, and you can either press enter or the down arrow, and so on. So once you've entered everything, your calculator should look like this. Okay, so L1 represents the input, L2 represents the output. Step number 6 on the Word document that's in Canvas says press Y equals. So here's the Y equals key. And we want to turn our plots on because we are going to create a scatter plot. So if I press the up arrow one time to highlight plot, and I press enter, then I press the down arrow one time, you'll notice it says plots. Okay. In step 7, it also mentions make sure you have nothing entered in this Y1, Y2, Y3. If there's any kind of data here, you're going to want to press the clear key so everything is empty. Okay, because we're going to develop an equation that's going to be pasted into Y1 when we're done with this exercise. The next thing you're going to do, according to step number 8, says press the zoom key. And we want to do a stat plot. So number 9 says zoom stat. So you can either down arrow till you highlight this or just press number 9. And there's our scatter plot. And if you note, this looks similar to what we did in the textbook. Right? The red dots represent our scatter plot that we did by hand. We just had our calculator do that just for us by entering the data. Okay, so now to put the regression line through these boxes, step 13 says press the stat key. Step 14 says press the right arrow key and move the cursor to calc. And then step 15 says press number 4, where it says linear regression. Okay. Then it says press the second key and 1, because we want to have L1. Remember, we stored our data in lines L1 and L2. So, let me just move this up so you can see a little bit better. So I'm going to press the second key, and L1 is here in blue above the number 1 key. So I press second and the 1 key, and there's my L1. Then we have to press the comma key, which is above number 7. Then press second and number 2, because that will give us the L2. Then we're going to press the comma key one more time. And then we're going to press this VARS key for variables. Press the right arrow one time to highlight Y variables. And then press number 1 or enter. Press number 1 again or enter. And you'll see, okay, we're going to do linear regression. We're going to get data from lines L1 and L2. And we're going to paste the result into Y1. So when you press enter, that's our linear regression equation. And if you press Y equals, you'll notice that it actually copied that in there for us. Now press the graph key, and look at that. We have a line going through all of our points, right? That's our line of best fit. And again, this is similar to what we did in the book. Right? These lines look similar, right? I did this one by hand, so it's not perfect. What's in my calculator, that looks really good.